To escape forced marriage, Omega hugged a stranger, unaware the stranger was Alpha King. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main character. Emily's life had been mapped out for her from the moment she was born into one of the most powerful families in the kingdom. Her father, a wealthy and influential man, had always made it clear that Emily's future was to strengthen the family's political alliances, and the only way to achieve that was through marriage. It wasn't a question of love, it was a question of power. She was already promised to a man she had never met, someone who had the connections to solidify her family's grip on the throne. But Emily couldn't shake the feeling of being trapped. Every day, she wondered if there was any way out, any way to escape the suffocating world her family had built for her. The wedding was just days away, and Emily felt more desperate with each passing minute. She had tried everything to protest, but nothing worked. Her voice had been drowned out by the overwhelming expectations of her family. One evening, feeling completely defeated, Emily found herself sneaking away from her family's estate, hoping to clear her mind. The streets were alive with the sounds of merchants and laughter, but she couldn't focus on anything except the weight of her impending marriage. It was in that moment of utter loneliness that she bumped into him. A man, tall and broad-shouldered, stood in front of her. She didn't know why, but instinctively, she reached out and hugged him. It was a desperate, impulsive act, seeking comfort from a stranger in the midst of her misery. The man didn't react at first, and Emily felt a strange sense of relief in his stillness. She buried her face in his chest, letting herself experience the briefest moment of peace. The man finally spoke, his voice deep and calm. "Are you all right?" he asked, his tone surprising her with its genuine concern. Emily pulled away, embarrassed. "I'm sorry," she stammered. "I didn't mean to." But before she could finish, the man stepped back, his eyes narrowing. Something about the way he looked at her made her shiver. There was something familiar, almost magnetic, about him. "You're not from around here, are you?" he asked. Emily, still flustered, shook her head. "No, I'm just passing through." The man seemed to study her for a moment longer, then offered a small smile. "It's all right. You're safe now." He turned to leave, but before he did, Emily caught a glimpse of something that made her heart skip a beat. The man's regal posture, his confident walk, the way the people around him seemed to step aside with respect, it all added up. She didn't know who he was, but something told her he wasn't just any stranger. Little did she know, the man she had just hugged was not just a stranger. He was Alexander, the Alpha King, and their lives were about to become entangled in ways she never could have imagined. The next day, Emily couldn't stop thinking about the mysterious man she had encountered the night before. She had tried to brush it off, convincing herself that it was just an impulsive reaction born out of desperation. But the more she replayed the moment in her mind, the more she couldn't shake the feeling that there was something different about him, something that set him apart from everyone she had known. She was supposed to be focused on her upcoming marriage, on the future that had already been decided for her, but her thoughts kept drifting back to that man. Who was he? And why had she felt such an overwhelming sense of peace when she hugged him? That evening, as she prepared for another long night in the grand estate, Emily was startled to see him again. This time, he was standing outside the estate gates, observing the grand building from a distance. She froze for a moment, not sure if she was seeing things, but then he turned and locked eyes with her. Her heart skipped a beat. "You again," she whispered to herself. It wasn't a question, more of a statement. The man's gaze softened as he stepped toward her, his movements slow but deliberate. There was something about the way he carried himself, something regal and commanding, that made Emily feel both nervous and intrigued. "I didn't expect to see you here," he said, his voice as calm as it had been the night before. Emily's breath caught in her throat. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice a little more defensive than she intended. He smiled slightly, as if amused by her sudden caution. "I could ask you the same thing." She wasn't sure why, but his words made her feel more at ease. There was no hostility in his tone, no judgment, just curiosity. "I'm not here to cause any trouble," he added. I just wanted to make sure you're all right. Emily hesitated, unsure of how to respond. She had grown up in a world where appearances were everything, where every interaction was carefully controlled. But with him, everything felt different, like the rules didn't apply. I'm fine, she finally said, though she wasn't sure if that was the truth. She had felt so trapped in her life, so out of control, and now this man was showing up unexpectedly, stirring emotions she didn't fully understand. The man didn't push further. Instead, he studied her with a thoughtful expression. It's dangerous for someone like you to be wandering alone, he said softly. You should be careful. Emily frowned. I can take care of myself, she replied, though the doubt in her voice betrayed her. There was a long pause, during which neither of them spoke. Emily could feel the weight of the silence between them, yet there was an odd sense of calm in it. She was tempted to ask more about him, to find out why he had come into her life at such a strange time. But she didn't. She didn't know what to say, or if she even should. The Alpha King, though a stranger to her, seemed to sense her uncertainty. He gave her one last look before turning to leave. Take care of yourself, Emily, he said, his voice lingering in the air like a quiet promise. And just like that, he was gone, disappearing into the night. But Emily couldn't shake the feeling that their paths were not done crossing, that the strange, mysterious man wasn't just an accidental encounter. He was something more. Little did she know, the man who had walked into her life so suddenly was not just any man. He was the Alpha King, and their fates were about to become far more entwined than she could ever have imagined. Days passed since their brief encounter, and Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. She tried to bury her thoughts of the mysterious man, but every time she wandered through the grand estate or looked out over the vast gardens, she found herself searching for him, wondering if he would appear again. She had told herself it was just a fleeting moment, nothing more than an odd meeting with a stranger. Yet, the memory of his calm voice, his piercing eyes, and the way he had looked at her lingered in her mind. It was as if she couldn't forget him even if she tried. Her days had become increasingly suffocating. The wedding preparations were in full swing, and each passing day brought her closer to the life she had never wanted. Her parents, ever the picture of composure, remained oblivious to the turmoil brewing inside her. The looming marriage felt like a trap she could not escape, one that tightened around her with every passing hour. Emily had never imagined that she could find herself wishing for something more, something outside the cold, calculated world her family had built. But here she was, caught between her duty and the quiet, insistent yearning for freedom. One afternoon, as Emily wandered through the gardens in an attempt to clear her mind, she spotted him again. The mysterious man, no, not just a man, but the Alpha King, was standing at the gates of her estate. He was looking out toward the horizon, his posture straight and regal, the way he had carried himself the night they met. He was still a stranger to her, yet she couldn't help but feel drawn to him, as if their paths were destined to cross again. This time, Emily didn't hesitate. She approached him, her heart racing in her chest. The closer she got, the more she realized how out of place she felt in the world she was born into. The man had a presence about him, a strength and confidence that made everything else feel insignificant. As she walked closer, he turned toward her, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. There was an unspoken understanding between them, a quiet recognition. You again, he said with a slight smile. You seem to be everywhere I go. Emily looked up at him, trying to keep her voice steady. I was just passing through, she said, though the truth was she had been searching for him. I didn't expect to see you again. The Alpha King's eyes softened, and he stepped closer. I told you to be careful, he said, his tone serious but not unkind. This world can be dangerous for someone like you. Emily's heart skipped a beat. For the first time, she felt like someone truly saw her, saw past the princess facade, past the perfectly curated image her family had built for her. I don't know what you mean, she said quietly, her voice faltering as her emotions got the better of her. The Alpha King didn't press her for answers, though. Instead, he simply stood by her side, offering her the silent comfort of his presence. They didn't speak for a while. Emily was unsure of what to say, or if she should say anything at all. The moment felt sacred, like a brief escape from the weight of her obligations. He didn't push her to explain, didn't demand anything from her. There's more to life than what you've been told, he said, his voice low. You deserve more than this. His words cut through her, a reminder of everything she had longed for but never thought she could have. A life outside the constraints of duty, a life where she could choose her own path. Emily's heart swelled with a mixture of hope and fear. Could it be possible? Could she truly escape this life? The Alpha King's gaze softened, and for a fleeting moment, Emily felt the warmth of something that wasn't just obligation or duty. It was something more, a promise of something she didn't yet understand but desperately wanted to explore. Take care of yourself, Emily, he said softly, before turning to leave. His words echoed in her mind as he disappeared once again into the distance. Emily stood there, the weight of his words sinking in, knowing that her life was about to change in ways she couldn't yet predict. Emily could not stop thinking about the Alpha King. Every day, his words echoed in her mind. There's more to life than what you've been told. You deserve more than this. It was as if a window had opened inside her, and she was finally able to see the world outside the prison of her family's expectations. Her life, once dictated by duty, now felt suffocating, and the walls seemed to be closing in on her. The wedding, which had once seemed like an unavoidable part of her future, now felt like a weight she could no longer bear. She tried to push it from her mind, but the image of the Alpha King remained. There was something so magnetic about him, something that drew her in despite everything she had been taught to believe. She hadn't seen him since that afternoon in the garden, but she couldn't help but feel that he was out there, somewhere, just beyond reach. As the days passed, Emily found herself looking for him, hoping for another chance encounter. She knew it was dangerous, that it was foolish to even consider defying the life she had been born into, but the longing for freedom, for a life she could choose, gnawed at her. One evening, as the sun began to set and the sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, Emily slipped away from her family's estate again. The air was cooler than usual, and the soft breeze rustled the trees around her as she walked through the garden. She needed to clear her head, to make sense of the chaos in her heart. And then, as if the world itself had conspired to bring them together, she saw him. The Alpha King stood at the far side of the garden, as if waiting for her. His presence was undeniable, like a force of nature that pulled everything around him into its orbit. Emily froze, unsure of what to do. Should she turn around and walk away, like she had so many times before? Or should she approach him and see where this strange connection might lead? Before she could make up her mind, he turned and saw her. His expression softened slightly, but there was no surprise in his eyes. It was as if he had been expecting her. "You look troubled," he said, his voice calm, yet there was an undertone of concern. Emily hesitated. "I feel like I'm suffocating," she admitted, the words slipping out before she could stop them. "I don't know what to do. I'm trapped in a life I don't want." The Alpha King stepped closer, his presence imposing but not unkind. He didn't rush her, didn't push her to say more, but his steady gaze seemed to offer a kind of reassurance. "You don't have to stay trapped," he said softly. "There is always a way out, if you're willing to take it." His words hit her like a tidal wave, and for a moment, Emily felt like she could breathe again. It was as if he had unlocked something deep inside her, something she had buried for years. But even as the hope began to rise in her chest, doubt crept in. Was it really possible? Could she truly walk away from everything she had known, from the life that had been planned for her since birth? She wasn't sure, but the possibility was there, faint but real. "I don't know if I'm strong enough," Emily said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've spent my whole life doing what others wanted. I don't know what it means to choose for myself." The Alpha King's gaze softened, and for the first time, Emily saw a hint of vulnerability in his eyes. "It's not about being strong enough. It's about being brave enough," he said gently. "And bravery is something that can be learned." He reached out, placing a hand on her shoulder in a gesture of quiet support. "You are not alone in this, Emily. I will help you, if you choose to take that first step." Emily felt a rush of emotions she couldn't fully process. The man she had met by chance, the one who had stirred something deep inside her, was offering her something she had never imagined, a way out. But was it too late? Could she leave everything behind and follow him into the unknown? For the first time in her life, Emily allowed herself to imagine a future without chains, a future where she could make her own choices. It was terrifying, but it was also exhilarating. She didn't have all the answers, and she didn't know where this path would lead. But in that moment, she knew one thing for sure. She could no longer stay in the life that had been forced upon her. She had to find her own way, even if it meant stepping into the unknown. The decision weighed heavily on Emily's heart. She stood in the quiet garden, the Alpha King's words still echoing in her mind. It's not about being strong enough. It's about being brave enough. Bravery. Could she truly find the courage to walk away from everything she had ever known? The life she was supposed to live, the wedding she had been groomed for, the future her family had planned. It all felt like a distant memory now. For the first time, she was considering something for herself. She had been so trapped in her role as the obedient daughter, the dutiful heir to the family legacy, that she had never allowed herself to dream of another path. But now, that path seemed within reach. The Alpha King had opened her eyes to possibilities she had never dared to imagine. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. As the days went on, Emily found herself struggling with her emotions. She felt an unspoken pull toward him, an undeniable connection that seemed to grow stronger each time she saw him. But with each passing moment, her fear also grew. What would happen if she followed him? What would her family think? What if it was all a mistake? The questions were endless, and the doubts in her mind began to mount. Still, Emily knew she couldn't go back to the way things were. Every part of her screamed that she needed to break free. And yet, the unknown was a daunting prospect. One evening, as Emily was sitting alone in her room, lost in thought, a soft knock at the door startled her. She hadn't been expecting anyone. "Come in," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The door opened, and standing in the doorway was the Alpha King. He was dressed in his usual dark, regal attire, but his presence seemed to fill the room with a warmth that made Emily's heart race. "I thought you might be here," he said quietly, stepping inside. Emily stood, unsure of how to react. The familiar flutter of nervousness and anticipation settled in her chest. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. He smiled, a calm, reassuring smile that seemed to put her at ease. "I came to see how you're doing," he said gently, "and to remind you that you don't have to do this alone." The weight of his words sank in. He wasn't just a stranger anymore. He was someone who cared about her well-being, someone who was willing to help her find a way out of the life she had been trapped in. Emily swallowed hard, trying to steady her emotions. "I don't know what to do," she admitted, her voice small. "I've spent so long trying to be what my family wanted me to be. I don't even know who I am anymore." The Alpha King took a step closer, his eyes softening with understanding. "You don't have to have all the answers right now," he said, "but you do have a choice. And that's the first step toward freedom." His words were like a balm to her soul, soothing the raw nerves that had been tangled up inside her for so long. She realized, in that moment, that she did have a choice. She could choose to stay and follow the path laid out for her, or she could take a leap into the unknown. The thought of leaving everything behind was both terrifying and exhilarating. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized that staying would only suffocate her. Emily looked up at him, her heart pounding in her chest. "I want to be free," she whispered, "but I don't know how." The Alpha King smiled again, a knowing, gentle smile. "I'll help you," he promised. "We'll figure this out together." His words filled Emily with a sense of warmth and determination. For the first time in years, she felt like she was on the verge of something more than just survival. She was standing on the edge of a new beginning. The future was uncertain, but with him by her side, she finally felt like she might have the strength to take that first step into the unknown. Emily's heart raced as she stood before the Alpha King, the man who had opened her eyes to a world she never imagined she could reach. His presence, always calm and reassuring, seemed to fill the room with a sense of quiet strength. But now, standing so close to him, Emily felt the weight of the decision ahead of her. Could she really do it? Could she walk away from everything she had ever known? Her family's expectations, the arranged marriage that loomed over her future, those had been her reality for as long as she could remember. But here, now, in this moment, there was a glimmer of something new, possibility. The Alpha King stood there, waiting patiently, understanding the depth of her struggle. He didn't pressure her to make a choice, but the gentle assurance in his gaze told her that whatever path she chose, she would not be alone. "You're not alone in this," he said softly, his voice like a steady anchor in the whirlwind of her thoughts. "Whatever you decide, I will be with you." Emily's throat tightened. She could hardly breathe, the weight of her decision bearing down on her chest. She had never considered defying her family before. The very idea had felt like an impossible dream, something that belonged to another world. But now, as she stood here with the Alpha King, that dream didn't feel so out of reach. The thought of stepping into the unknown both terrified and excited her. She could leave everything behind, the life that had been dictated for her, the chains of expectation, and step into a world where she could choose her own destiny. But what would that future look like? Would she be able to live with the consequences of her choice? The Alpha King seemed to sense her uncertainty. He stepped closer, his presence steady and reassuring. "I know it's not easy," he said, his voice low, "but you have the strength inside you. You just have to believe in yourself." His words were like a beacon of light in the darkness, guiding her through the storm of doubts that swirled inside her. She had always been taught to follow the rules, to obey her parents, to play her part in the grand plan. But in this moment, she realized that she was more than just a pawn in someone else's game. She was her own person. "I don't know if I can do it," Emily whispered, her voice barely audible. "I've been so afraid my whole life. Afraid of disappointing my family, afraid of the consequences." The Alpha King's expression softened. "Fear is natural," he said gently, "but it doesn't have to control you. You can choose to step forward, to face your fear, and take back your power." Emily looked up at him, her eyes searching his face for any sign of doubt, but all she saw was certainty, a quiet, unwavering confidence that seemed to radiate from him. She had never been so sure of anything in her life. Maybe he was right. Maybe it was time for her to take that first step into the unknown. With a deep breath, Emily nodded, the decision finally settling into her heart. "I'm ready," she said, her voice steady now, her resolve firm. The Alpha King's smile was gentle but knowing. "Then let's go," he said, offering her his hand. For the first time in what felt like forever, Emily didn't hesitate. She reached out and took his hand, feeling the warmth of his touch spread through her. As they turned to leave the room, she felt the weight of the world lifting from her shoulders. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, she felt like she had the power to shape it. With him by her side, she could finally see a way forward, a way out of the life that had been forced upon her. Together, they would face whatever came next, and Emily knew that no matter the challenges, she would no longer be alone. The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions for Emily. With each passing hour, she felt herself stepping further away from the life she had always known and into the unknown future that stretched out before her. It was exhilarating, but also terrifying. The Alpha King, whose presence had become a constant in her thoughts, was now by her side in a way that felt both comforting and strange. They had left her family's estate quietly, under the cover of night, with only the barest essentials packed. Emily had never felt so free, yet so vulnerable. She was leaving behind everything she had ever known, the grand estate, her title, the family that had always defined who she was. And yet, the weight she had carried for so long seemed to lift with every step she took away from it. The Alpha King was there with her, his steady presence like a rock in the midst of the storm. He didn't rush her or push her to make decisions she wasn't ready for, but his quiet support was something she had never experienced before. For the first time in her life, Emily felt like she had a choice. It was a strange feeling, both liberating and terrifying. "You're doing well," the Alpha King said one evening as they walked through a dense forest, the sky above them fading into twilight. "I know it's not easy, but every step you take brings you closer to the life you want." Emily glanced at him, her heart swelling with a mixture of gratitude and uncertainty. "It feels like I'm walking blindfolded," she admitted. "I don't know where I'm going, and I'm scared I might make the wrong choice." The Alpha King smiled softly, his gaze unwavering. "Fear is natural. But remember, sometimes the greatest risk is not taking a step at all." His words settled in her mind, like a gentle reminder that the path to freedom was not without its challenges. But it was a path she could walk. It was a path where she could make her own decisions, a path that didn't rely on anyone else's expectations. They continued their journey, the quiet of the forest surrounding them. Emily had never realized how peaceful it could be to be away from the noise of her old life. There was no pressure here, no obligations to fulfill, no expectations to live up to. She could simply be herself. It was a revelation. As they traveled together, Emily noticed how much she was learning from the Alpha King. He wasn't just a man of power. He was thoughtful and patient, guiding her with subtlety rather than force. He didn't try to shape her into something she wasn't. Instead, he helped her find her own strength. There were moments of silence between them, but it was never uncomfortable. In those silences, Emily found herself reflecting on everything she had left behind and everything she was gaining. She had always thought that her future had been written for her, but now she understood that the story was hers to write. And with the Alpha King by her side, she felt like she could finally begin to write it. They traveled for days, moving through unfamiliar lands, staying in small inns and quiet villages, always on the move. The world outside her family's estate was different. It was raw, real, and unfiltered. Every new place they visited felt like a new chapter in her life, a new chance to discover who she truly was. And though she still carried some of the weight of her past, she felt lighter with each day. One evening, as they sat by a small campfire, Emily looked at the Alpha King and realized how much he had come to mean to her. He had given her the courage to step away from everything she had known and walk into the unknown. And though she wasn't sure where this journey would take them, she felt certain of one thing. She was no longer walking alone. The journey had brought Emily to a place she never imagined she would be. Days turned into weeks as she traveled with the Alpha King, and the world seemed to open up before her in ways she had never experienced. The weight of her old life was still heavy on her shoulders, but with each passing day, the burden seemed a little lighter. She had left behind the life she was born into, and yet, she had found something even more precious in the freedom she had gained, the ability to choose. They had made their way through forests, over rolling hills, and across quiet rivers. Emily had seen sights she never thought she would experience, and each new day brought with it a sense of wonder and discovery. The Alpha King was always there, steady and reliable, his presence never far from her side. He had been patient with her, giving her the time and space she needed to adjust to this new life. But there was something else that Emily had begun to realize. She was beginning to see him differently. There was more to him than the leader of a powerful kingdom. She saw the kindness in his eyes, the way he made her feel safe without ever making her feel weak. He had never once asked her to be anything other than herself. Slowly, Emily's feelings toward him deepened. She wasn't sure when it happened, but somewhere along the way, she had come to care for him in a way that went beyond gratitude. It was more than that. It was respect, admiration, and something she couldn't quite put into words. They were walking along a quiet path one evening, the sky painted with hues of purple and pink as the sun dipped below the horizon. The air was cool, and the world seemed to be at peace. Emily walked a little slower than usual, her mind swirling with thoughts. She wasn't sure how to voice the emotions that had been growing inside her, but she felt a pull to speak. "I don't know what the future holds," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I do know one thing. I'm glad I'm not facing it alone." The Alpha King looked at her, his expression unreadable for a moment, before softening. "You don't have to face anything alone, Emily," he replied, his voice warm. "I'll be by your side, no matter what comes." The sincerity in his words made her heart swell. She wasn't sure if it was the promise he made or the way he made her feel, but in that moment, she realized just how much he had come to mean to her. They had been through so much together, and the bond between them had grown stronger than she could have ever expected. Emily took a deep breath, the weight of the words she had been holding back finally coming to the surface. "I've spent so much of my life feeling like I had no choice, like I was always meant to follow someone else's path," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "But now, I see that I do have a choice, and I want to choose for myself." The Alpha King's gaze never wavered, his eyes filled with understanding. "And that's the most important choice you could make," he said quietly. "Choosing yourself. You're stronger than you realize, Emily, and you're more than capable of forging your own path." His words resonated deeply within her. Emily had spent her whole life being told what to do, who to be, and what was expected of her. But in this moment, she realized that she had the power to choose differently. She could decide her future, and for the first time, that future didn't have to be dictated by anyone else. She looked at the Alpha King, a sense of peace settling in her heart. "Thank you," she whispered, the words feeling like a promise to herself more than anything else. "For everything." The Alpha King smiled, a small, reassuring smile that made her feel like she had found her place in this new world. "It's not over yet," he said gently. "But whatever happens next, we'll face it together." With that, they continued walking side by side, the path ahead uncertain but the bond between them stronger than ever. Emily didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in her life, she felt ready to face it head-on, with the Alpha King by her side. Emily's world had changed in ways she never imagined possible. The days of following the rules, of living a life shaped by the expectations of others, seemed like a distant memory now. Every new step she took in the journey with the Alpha King felt like a small victory, a triumph of her own freedom over the life she had been told to lead. And yet, despite the growing sense of independence, Emily knew that the road ahead was still uncertain. There were many challenges yet to be faced, and her past would not easily fade away. The Alpha King had shown her that she had the power to choose, but it was still up to her to embrace that power fully. As they continued to travel together, Emily grew stronger. The doubts that once clouded her thoughts were beginning to dissipate, replaced by a quiet determination. Every day, she discovered more about herself, about what she was capable of, what she wanted from life, and what kind of person she wanted to become. But even as she embraced her new path, there were moments when the weight of her past still lingered. She would catch herself glancing back at the world she had left behind, wondering if she had made the right decision. The Alpha King, however, never faltered. He was always by her side, offering support, guidance, and patience. He never pressured her to move faster or make choices she wasn't ready for. He simply walked beside her, trusting that in time, she would find her way. One evening, as they set camp near a peaceful lake, Emily found herself staring into the calm waters, her thoughts turning inward. The sun had set, and the sky was now filled with 1,000 stars. The peaceful silence of the night was only broken by the soft crackling of the campfire. The Alpha King had stepped away for a moment, giving Emily the space she needed. As she sat there, she couldn't help but think about all that had brought her to this point. She had never imagined that a chance encounter with a stranger would lead her here, to this life of uncertainty and freedom. But now, looking back at everything, she realized that it was the best decision she had ever made. The choice to walk away from the life she had known was not an easy one, but it had been the right one. As the Alpha King returned to the fire, Emily looked up at him, a sense of gratitude filling her heart. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice barely audible. "For everything. For showing me that I can be more than what I was told to be." The Alpha King's gaze softened, and he smiled gently. "You always had that strength inside you, Emily," he said. "I just helped you see it." Emily felt a warmth spread through her at his words. It wasn't just the Alpha King who had helped her find herself. It was also her own courage, her own ability to embrace change. She had found the strength to make a choice, to take control of her own life. The future was still unknown, but now, she felt ready to face it. With the Alpha King by her side, she knew she would no longer be alone in the journey ahead. Together, they had forged a path through the unknown, and whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. As the night stretched on, Emily's heart felt lighter than it had in years. She was no longer bound by the expectations of others. She had chosen her own way, and in that choice, she had found her freedom.